What have you learned?
So this week I injured my shoulder, which has affected my sleep and made it apparent how like taking care of the body is important, and it's difficult to practice. I mean, it's difficult to do Dharma practice if when the body's in pain, or if the body lacks vitality.
Yeah, the vitality part especially. What have you been able to do, I wonder?
Um, well, it's not terrible, but it's just, I noticed the difference from a previous week where I had more energy and I was able to uh, what feels like able to go deeper in practice, whereas this week I lacked the concentration, or I was like yesterday I was falling asleep while meditating. I would notice my body moving, falling forward.
Okay. Well, I hope it feels better soon.
Yeah, it's nothing still. Um, but it leads me to the question of, I mean, you mentioned like awareness is free, but how can awareness be free when it's tied to a body?
Well, it's not really tied to a body, as you'll soon find out. What's the human lifespan? I don't know, let's say it's 100 years. Within 100 years, you'll find out that it's not tied to the body at all. But even while you're living, uh, I think one way to look at it might be that the brain is a transducer for awareness or consciousness. Is that how you're using awareness? How are you using that word?
Awareness,
Yeah, consciousness itself.
the yeah, the the thing that experiences, or the
The process of experiencing might be more accurate.
yeah.
So, in general, for now, your your awareness with the capital A, consciousness, the
Hmm.
primary, the source, the creative, is using the brain or pretending to use the brain as a transducer. And that's why we have sight, sound, taste, smell, those things. And so, it's very difficult to formulate it in any way that's not going to be inaccurate. But the way that some people have formulated is that there's a concentration of consciousness, which represents the individual. I don't know if that's true. I mean, it's
Mm.
speculation, it's a way of speaking. But you could imagine, and it's only imagination, an ocean of consciousness, much larger than this cosmos. And there are these little uh, funnels or little concentrations of awareness that correspond to the inputs to a single human brain. That's one way to look at it. But that's not doing it justice, because the ocean is in the 10 directions, right? The north, the south, the east, the northeast, the so on and so forth, and the nadir and the zenith. And so we're
Hmm.
talking at least, what is that? At least 4 dimensions or 3 dimensions.
Three dimensions there.
Well, wait a minute, because there's up and down too, right?
I mean, up and down is a single dimension.
Okay, and then side to side is another one.
Yeah,
And then what about the
and then
horizontal plane? The horizontal plane,
yeah, so it's 3 dimensions.
and then we add
So
time.
3D time is four.
So now we add four. So that's one way of visualizing it. it's, again, that's just a speculation, a way to make it begin to be comprehensible for humans, what the circumstance really is. But those dimensions, of course, don't really exist, time or space. And that gets very, very hard for the human brain. The human brain can't really do that very well. Although some of the computation guys are starting to, and some of the physics guys are moving beyond the Einsteinian and they're doing I don't know, some kind of mathematical or geometrical convolutions to try and get their heads around that. It's going to be difficult.
One thing I notice when I have my eyes open and I look at my experience, I can see it as, everything I see in all the directions. I can see that as, if I focus on it, I can see it as being like it's all mind. It's all,
Yeah, well, what else could it be?
right. But then if I close my eyes, then it's more difficult to do that, because then it's like there's no content to see.
Well, this is where pain can be very useful. If you're in pain, you can close your eyes. Here, let's try it. And close your eyes and then take a few deep breaths to get all the stale air out. Now, there may be a large black expanse. Can you visualize that or feel that or see that or whatever the word is?
Yeah.
But in this expanse, there's sensations and sounds. In this expanse, you have no personal history. You have no name, you have no relations, you have no future or career or dates, anything like that. It's just empty black space. But in that space there's certain, let's call them objects. Maybe pressure on your body somewhere, or a sound in the distance. If you're having pain, you can focus on that pain and study it. Don't run from it. Don't try and minimize it. Don't exaggerate it. Just study it. If you study it for a while, it'll change. The distance that you place between the sound of my voice and that pain, or the pressure on your body somewhere, is totally arbitrary. It could just as easily be the distance from here to the moon as 4 inches. It's all imagination. And so with your eyes closed, your mind is much simpler. And at times easier to work with, and at times more difficult to work with. But then when you open your eyes, you can see the rest of your mind. Because all this is mind, right? Mm-hmm. What else could it be? And then you open your eyes, and all of a sudden your mind is filled with all these objects, the sky and the trees and the clouds. But I think it's not disputable in 2024 that that's mind.
Mm-hmm.
So
then the question is, how do you? Well, so when with my eyes closed, I noticed there's more attachment to this, like sense, the sensations of the body, the pain, the pressure, the these like gross sensations. Um, but also, even if it's pleasurable, there's a lot more focus on the feelings around the body, it seems. And
even though it's
so,
okay, so you're feeling it as being attached to it. Be that as it may, you're free to move these sensory inputs as close together, as far apart as you'd like, and create a spaciousness in your mind. So a pain or a pressure or a sensation, if it's looming large, all you have to do is zoom out. And then because there's more space, it becomes relatively smaller.
mm,
It's not easy with actual pain, but your interpretation of the pain is completely up to you. So it takes some time. You have to play with it a bit,
mhm.
and over your lifetime, you'll have plenty of opportunities to do that. But start creating a spaciousness. But because your mind is infinitely large, you could say. You could also say it's infinitely small, but it's
Yeah.
infinitely large is usually more comfortable for people. And then you have a lot of room for whatever thoughts, emotions, sensations, memories, or painful impulses that might arise.
Mm,
And that spaciousness is a real gift. And you have it, if let's say you get in a conflict at work, well, you can instantaneously put a huge amount of space around it. It's easier to move. You feel less trapped or conflicted, or you must do this or you must do that. Does that make sense?
that makes sense.
Your mind is much more malleable and much more. I was going to say plastics, but then I'm reminded of all the microplastics that are in the brain, and so I won't go there. But yeah, you can do much more with your mind than you imagine. It's not this little,
Right.
It's not this cantaloupe-sized space in your skull. It's actually the size of the cosmos, larger than that. Have you been reading The Flower Ornament?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Because that will help. That will help a lot.
Yeah,
Do you want to read a little bit of it now?
sure.
Where are you?
I'm on page 1422.
The Realm of Reality?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
With Gopa.
Okay, why don't you start on the last paragraph, 1422?
Yeah.
Why don't you start on page 421, the bottom paragraph, and go to the end of that paragraph on the next page.
Okay.
All right? I'll ring a bell for you. This is page 1421, Entry into the Realm of Reality. This amazing sacred text, as sacred as any text is going to get, that's been handed down to us from the 1st and 2nd centuries, recently translated to English, and a real boon. Okay, here we go.
In each of the 84,000 main cities on the continent, he had 500 sanctuaries built, complete with all the finest features, equipped with all utensils, supplies, and facilities, adorned with gardens, buildings, promenades, and delightful groves. In each sanctuary he also had Buddha memorials built, high and wide, adorned with many arrays of jewels. And he invited the Buddha Supreme Son to all those cities, where he presented the Buddha with inconceivable offerings of all kinds. The miracle of the entry of the Buddha into the cities fostered virtue in innumerable people, and all those with disturbed minds attained tranquility, while those with calm minds developed the intense joy of seeing the Buddha. Those who were full of joy attained purity of will for enlightenment, while those whose will for enlightenment was pure developed great compassion. Those of good will became involved in the quest for all Buddha teachings, while those who knew the principles of the Buddha teachings set their minds to meditation on the intrinsic nature of all things. Those who had realized the equality of things set their minds on realizing the equality of past, present, and future. Those who attained the scope of knowledge of past, present, and future entered into the light of knowledge of the succession of all Buddhas, while those who had entered the knowledge of various manifestations of Buddhas set their minds on the salvation of all sentient beings. Those engaged in the salvation of all beings vowed to complete the path of enlightening beings,
Slow down
while
just a
those who
bit.
had
Slow down just a bit, please.
those engaged in the salvation of all beings vowed to complete the path of enlightening beings, while those who had realized the equanimity of the path generated the light of knowledge to bring forth the cycles of teachings of all Buddhas. Those who were ready for the guidance of the ocean of teaching set their minds on pervading the network of all lands with their own bodies, while those who realized the equality of lands undertook to know the faculties of all sentient beings. And those engaged in consideration of the faculties of all sentient beings in accord with their inclinations purified the determination to reach omniscience. Entering into the fulfillment of such benefits for such people, the King, Lord of Glory, had the Buddha Supreme Son enter all the cities to develop and guide those people by the inconceivable vision of the miracle of the Buddha.
Now, who do you think that Prince Lord of Glory was? You should see him as none other than this Buddha, Shakyamuni, who was at that time a prince named Lord of Glory, who attained kingship and was on good terms with the Buddha Supreme Son. And who do you think the King Lord of Wealth, father of Lord of Glory, was? You should see him as none other than the Buddha Jewel Flower Light, who at that time was a king named Lord of Wealth, who attained supreme perfect enlightenment at an enlightenment site symbolized by reflection of the moon, and expounded the teachings surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in untold Buddha lands in a world called Shining Lamp of the Aura of Buddha, in a world system called Family Born of a Diamond reflecting past, present, and future, in the center of an ocean of worlds called Multitude of Reflections in the space of the cosmos of realities, which was to the east as past as many oceans as atoms in a world. Period. Boy, that was a long sentence. Okay. So the way these things are read, there's many ways that these sutras are read. But one of them is to have a couple and they take turns reading, or to have a large group and they chant together, or to read it alone. There's many ways that was done, but they're all good. Thank you very much for reading that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Questions about anything? And you can see how they recapitulate, and how how in the sutra, it's like a fractal or a hologram. The little pieces contain the whole thing. I don't know if that's obvious, but it will be later. Anyway, questions on anything?
Changing the subject a bit. On the last videos, you were talking about, somebody was talking about, I think, the urge to start a company and to be successful in the world in that way. And I related a lot to it, and so I wanted to ask some questions about, to expand on it.
Okay, I mean, to a point, we can do that. Sure, why not? But remember, everybody's different, and everybody's at a different place in their trajectory.
Yeah.
And those who generalize do not know, and those who know do not generalize. But let's go ahead. Let's see what we got.
Yeah. So, well, I guess there's a few things. One, I thought it was interesting to point out that the culture that we're in is very much like encouraging the hustle and that sort of thing.
It's a frenzy.
It's a frenzy, yeah.
It's been that for a while.
Right.
That may be part of the reason it's falling apart. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I recognize that. but then on the flip side, like I also see it, it also feels like we're in a window of opportunity where there's this new technology and a lot of things can be done, and I feel this, and so I guess I feel this drive to, learn a lot and to build things and to figure things out, and
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all wrong with that.
and so yeah, I guess just trying to figure out like, well, how much of it is, you know, valuable to do, and how much of it is trying to keep up in a rat race. Like,
That's a good thing to distinguish. But there's so many things to be built, but there's so many things to be fixed too. I've interacted
yeah.
with our healthcare system, and it's the disaster.
Hmm.
And old people know what I'm talking about. And insurance is a disaster, and government programs are disasters, and the whole thing's like falling apart. So, in addition to building new things, there's the very rich possibility of helping these other things work properly.
Hmm.
So nothing wrong with that. I don't see the question in there.
Um, well, the question there was like, how do I distinguish between, this valuable drive and the frenzy? And
Well, it would depend what is the aim. What are you aiming to do? Make a quick buck, or contribute to society, or make a slow buck, or you're young too. It's
yeah,
different on the age, right? When you're young, you should. I mean, as a generalization, you should try many things to learn, if nothing else.
yeah. There's a few things that come to mind. Like, there's there's a component where it's like, yeah, I want to contribute, I want to learn, um,
Great.
um, and then but then there's definitely like the money component. Like, I want to make money, and that I think that's the component where I have trouble figuring out, like, is it
As
greed
a
or is it
as a general
necessary?
rule, although there's many exceptions, people will pay for something that provides them with value. If it's something they need or they want, and in worst case scenarios, you create the need and the want, which is a lot of what we do in this country, or at least in the modern West. So, of those three, what would you say it was? Is it something people need? Is it something people want? Or is it something where you're going to create the need and the want, or the want?
Um, but I guess it's something people need, I would argue.
Well, then give people what they need, and then you typically that's how you make money in a non-corrupt society.
Mm.
So nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
All right.
So my next question is, how do I balance all these efforts, and just find myself thinking there's not enough time to do everything.
If there's a will, there's a way. It's been a while since I've run into anybody that was at a real risk of running out of time that didn't actually also squander a lot of time.
Hmm.
And when you're young, you're healthy, you're resilient, you can do a lot more, and you should, I suppose. The first thing you would have to ask yourself was, do I squander any time?
Hmm.
And then other than that, then the other question just becomes, like intellectual, I don't know, shenanigans or something. But It's not a
What do you mean?
legitimate question. I don't know. I'm sure there's a Mula story about this, but I wouldn't worry about running out of time until I'd exhausted all of the time that I was squandering, and I got rid of all of that. I
Yeah.
guess that's what I mean. Otherwise, it's just a academic question with low yield.
That makes sense.
But I can say this as an old man, you've got a lot less time in your life than you imagine.
I can believe that.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. I mean the not squandering time. I've definitely made a lot of improvements on that.
The what? The Naqshbandi? Did you say Naqshbandi?
So the not wasting time. I've made a lot of improvement on that.
Okay, well, good.
Um,
Do we have Dharma questions?
well, one question on my mind is like, how do you get to the point of non-regressing?
Non-regressing in which dimension?
Um, in like in in the pursuit of awakening.
Do you think you could give the quest up?
No,
Right. You're stuck, my friend. For the rest of your life, you will always want to know the answers to these questions. So in that dimension, at least, you're beyond regression.
mm.
You're always going to wonder, what is this consciousness thing, and what's the meaning and purpose of life, and why am I here, and what is this all about? You can't go back now.
But it feels like sometimes I'm closer, and then sometimes I'm less close.
Well, that's true. But it's not that you're less or close or more close. It's that you've got layers and layers of curtains of obfuscations or what they call defilements or just random crap that's floating around in between you and clarity. But you're a young man, and usually there's a woman involved.
What do you mean?
I mean exactly that it's usually those kinds of drives, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying is that usually the case or not? In my experience, it's been the case.
I, I'm not sure what you.
Okay, so in history, many monks. I mean, there's been many monks, and even in Buddhism, there were quite a few monks, and in Catholicism, and I don't know about Islam, but basically the idea of being celibate was there to like keep the young students with their eyes on the road, and vice versa for women. Well, in Islam, they segregate men and women, or at least they used to.
Mm.
So that, I mean, that's just the reality of human life, right? Young human life.
Well, then there's also the examples of the illuminates who like just were settled with a family and stuff,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's the vast majority of all those religions
Right.
are people that are coupled up and have children or don't have children, but they're together, etc. That's what do they say in Islam? Woman is the twin half of man,
Mm.
or man is the twin half of woman by the same corollary. Okay, by the same proposition.
Mhm. I'm missing what your point was in this context.
What you call distance from the way is actually just thoughts, impulses, desires, and fears, distractions that are piled in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And those, it's good to be able to set those aside.
I see. You had a tweet. Let me bring it up. The fire of Zen.
From this book, The Teachings of Zen. Okay.
But it says, this thing is like an enormous fire, fierce flames pervading the sky, with never the slightest interruption. Everything in the world is thrown into it, immediately evaporating away like a fleck of snow.
Like a fleck of snow, yeah.
So my understanding is referring to the the original mind.
It's more than that. It's a very poetic and good description of the first rush of Kensho, among other things. When you see the world, it's kind of like Heraclides, right? There's everything's in motion, but it's much more than that. This thing is like an enormous fire, fierce flames pervading the sky with never the slightest interruption. So that's a description of the world. And if you could speed this world up, for example, I mean, this is not what he's referring to, but it just occurred to me that if you turn the world up, instead of, 10 frames per second, you did 100 or 1,000 frames per second, you'd see that the world is in flames, clear flames. And the first rush of Kensho, Satori, for some at least, it's like the world. I think this is where the burning bush of Moses, by the way, is from this. Because it looks as if the world's on fire of sorts. It's and they also, it reminds me of the what is it, the verse in the Quran where they talk about this holy fire in the niche, the niche verse, or the light verse, I'm sorry, in which they describe this niche in which a fire is burning without heat. And so fire is kind of a metaphor. But the whole thing is, depending on how you look at it, is like an enormous fire, fierce flames pervading the sky with never the slightest interruption. And then everything in the world is thrown into it, immediately evaporating it away like a fleck of snow. Yes, and the whole thing, you realize, is nothing but sensation, illusion, maya. It's not really there. It appears substantial, but it's not. And then you realize in another realization that the whole thing has no size, and so it just evaporates like a snowflake on a hot rock. The cosmos, the size of the cosmos is that of a snowflake in one way of looking at it. But you can look at it in any way you want. It's not corporeal. It's not tangible. It's not really there. And so it's just a beautiful poem that this Zen master wrote. And I've just described my free associations to it. There are other free associations, I'm sure. Any other questions about that?
Yeah. So
go ahead.
when I practice, I first there's this idea that I need to like expand, like like let go of just my body and expand and see myself as the mind, as everything. And there's a feeling of like expansion. But then I have reading this, I have this idea that rather than that, it's more of what I need to do is stop all these thoughts and views and ideas and efforts like that, and that the real mind will just be there or something. And
Do both, alternate. But sit right now. Okay, you're sitting in a room, right, in Austin, Texas. Now, can you make your mind the size of your room?
mm-hmm.
All right. Is there a window?
Yeah.
All right. Can you make your mind include what's outside that window?
Somewhat.
This is what I was trying to do. Did you listen to any of the prior videos?
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm trying to do when I'm trying to get people to acknowledge that the birds are as real as your thoughts, or vice versa. Your thoughts are as real as birds, and that basically there are different categories of thoughts. And so when you look outside, you're just seeing another aspect of your mind, the aspect that sees color and shape and wind. The Zen. There's a Zen story where two people are arguing about a flag moving, and one says that the wind moved, and the other one says no, the flag moved. And then the Zen master said, no, it's your mind. Your mind moved, which is the actual case. And now that we're in the 24th century, or 22nd, whatever, 21st century, sorry, it's obvious from science now that the brain constructs a model of the world. It constructs the world. What else could it be? I mean, with quantum mechanics and just basic neurobiology, it's clear that the only thing that, and this is grossly oversimplifying. I don't know if this actually helps, but I'll try anyway. As you know, Donald Hoffman.
The Strange Loop guy?
No, that's Donald Hofstadter. I recommend him too. He's good too. But Donald Hoffman points out that what we call the world is akin to a computer screen. And what we're looking at is not a tree, but an icon of a tree, of an icon that points to a file that has looks nothing like a tree. It's made of something totally different. But what we see on the surface of the screen are little icons. And he uses the example of drag. Remember in Windows when you used to be able to take a pile of papers or a letter and drag it and put it in the wastebasket and they would be gone? Yeah. Well, you know about computers. There's no file of papers there. There's no wastebasket. And that movement across the screen is just imaginary. Right? Mm-hmm. So the same thing here. We see a tree, we see clouds, but you and I both know that behind that there has to be something completely different than that. Otherwise it just wouldn't work. Mm. I don't know if I'm explaining it very well. Can you explain it better?
Well, the way I think about it, I just think about dreams, and
that's another big clue. Yeah,
it could be a dream, and it would look the same, and so obviously it's not out there, but it's a projection, of some sorts.
It's an interpretation.
Right.
So for the sake of simplicity for now, even though there's no central processing unit in reality, well, we could say that the brain is a central processing unit. It's taking in data and it's interpreting it, and it's saying, okay, that's a tree, that's a leaf, that's the breeze moving.
Mm-hmm.
This is a body, this is a hand. But you and I both know that that can't be the case. It's a very stubborn illusion. It's like what Einstein said about time. It's a stubborn illusion.
Mm. But
And
then is there
go ahead.
is there some sort of information reality behind it or something like that?
For the purposes of this illustration, yes. Did you see the Matrix?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, well, we can imagine a virtual reality if you'd like, as in the Matrix. So let's say you have a full body, what do you call it? The interface, controller, or whatever you call it, headset. So you're walking around, and you're walking down let's use Red Dead Redemption. You're walking down a path, and there's snow on both sides of the road, and there's a broken down old shack, and there's somebody in there asleep, let's say. But there's no road, there's no snow, there's no you really walking down the road. There's nobody asleep in the shack. It's all zeros and ones. It's just an illusion created by you, your brain, and the machine. And so I'm not saying that the world is a simulation. It most definitely is not, but it's akin to that. Your brain can be fooled into believing that electronic impulses are actually trees and birds and clouds and the wind. Easily fooled.
Right. So that I get. Where my understanding breaks down is that, like, in a VR simulation or in the Matrix, there's a computer behind it that holds information on a hard drive, and there's
okay, and in our brain there are apparently some fixed programs that interpret certain things as colors, others as sounds, others as why don't we see sounds? And why don't we hear colors? It's arbitrary.
Right.
Okay, so we have something akin to that. I'm not a computer person, but there's something takes those signals and says, okay, this is going to be visual stimuli. This is going to be auditory stimuli. This is going to be pain. This is going to be pressure. This is going to be temperature. But it's totally arbitrary. You can see that, no?
Yeah.
All right. But see, this is a metaphor, a crude metaphor that we use for now. Because we can in this century, because we have computers and virtual realities and things like that. But clearly, the brain can construct all of this itself. Like you can smell in the dream. You can see colors in a dream that aren't there, and people that aren't there, and conversations that aren't there. Your brain just constructed it. Now, you have more degrees of freedom in a dream, let's say, than you do right now, sitting in your room. And to get past that would be more difficult. But the minute you do, then strange things start happening, like a bush bursts into flames, clear flames of clear light. And so, to get past the illusion, the Maya, that's what we're here for. To get back home. Now, it's infinitely more sophisticated than any video game we could even imagining, right? But that's just a crude metaphor.
And is home then this, like, the substrate or something?
Yeah. But the substrate's not a substrate. It's some kind of non-reducible process that's literally transcends time and space. So you can't even call it a process, really. Our little monkey brains just can't go there unless we strip them way down.
What do you mean we strip them way down?
We get rid of all our hopes and fears and desires and petty little conflicts and our, worries about this and that, and we just accord with the way. And in the beginning, that means quieting the mind down and getting rid of unnecessary distractions and saturating in texts that have been shown to do this. So it's just like escaping the matrix, except the matrix is a very crude metaphor, and the simulation is a crude metaphor.
Right. I think that made sense.
Well, it may have made sense to you. I hope it did. I don't know if it's going to make sense to people out there, but if this doesn't make sense, go to Donald Hoffman. Donald Hoffman has some introductory lectures on this, on why he gave up. He became an idealist, and why he gave up a lot. He's a very smart mathematician, philosopher type, but a good mathematician and a good computationalist. Go to him or go to Chris Levin, and that's more for the physics side. That reality, what we call reality is information exchange. Information exchange is what observation is, and that we can swap out the word information for the word energy. So the fun part about living these days is that we get to see science, and including computer science and physics and philosophy all come together in the same place, at the same place that we've been the whole time, in the perennial philosophies, right?
What's the second one you mentioned? Chris Levin?
No, Chris Fields.
Chris Fields.
Very interesting guy.
This guy with the big beard?
Yes.
Gray beard? Okay.
Yeah, and he's an independent man, so he would do things like he'd go to like Sands and talk there. But increasingly, he's being used by other very highly regarded scientists, neuroscientists, and he's really into the quantum mechanics and the Markov blankets and the evolutionary biology, and he's just a really smart guy with an open mind, and you can tell it's really useful.
Okay.
Now, neither he nor Hoffman are particularly Dharma guys. They're just following the science and the logic. So that's fun. So I recommend him, and then at least some basic Donald Hoffman. And then for you, I would also recommend, what's his name? The psychiatrist from London, the guy who's going to win all kinds of prizes. What's his name? The Markov blanket guy. Carlson? I'm blocking out his name. Mike Levin. And sometimes there's three-way debates between Mike Levin, Chris Fields, Carl Friston. Yeah, thank you. My decrepit old brain is giving. Okay, so okay.
Are there particular books from these that I should look at? Or just
Chris Fields? No, these days things are moving so fast. Friston's written probably thousands of papers. Chris Fields, I don't think he's maybe co-authored some papers, but he's not a book guy. I think you can get everything you need on YouTube. And Donald Hoffman probably did write. Do you have a list of Hoffman books there?
Yes. The Case Against Reality.
There you go. That one right there.
Okay.
So these guys are discovering it the hard way. They're doing it the hard way, and the Sufis talk about this all the time. Even in the time of, in much earlier times, 1,000 years ago, scientists and thinkers and philosophers were discovering the same things that had been spoken of by the Dharma guys, or the prophets, or the, because it's all one truth. And science, true science, is as pure an endeavor as Dharma. Not nearly as efficient, but it's a pure endeavor. A quest for truth. But now everything's falling apart. Have you noticed?
What do you mean?
In physics? Our interpretation of quantum mechanics has been kind of ass backwards.
I'm not the most familiar with it.
Well, it's okay. So in your spare time, which there is, learn about these things. They're just, because you're going to follow them on your lifetime, you'll see very fascinating things occur. It's like art or philosophy or things like that, or poetry or music. They just enrich your life. And so when you're young, start building the foundation of these things wherever you want to start. Start with a good book, or a good teacher, or a good lecture, or something that has some substance to it, and start laying a foundation so you will enjoy these all your life. So that's a piece of advice I'd give to an intelligent young woman or man.
Okay.
Because we have narrowed ourselves beyond recognition. We've become these hyper specialized tiny little people. All I do is sell insurance and watch football. That's it. That's me. That's a terrible way. That's a terrible waste of a human life. Because you could do that and a bunch of other things as well. But people, because of the idiosyncrasies of the Industrial Revolution, we've become narrow and more narrow, which is the opposite of what God created.
Yeah. Well, on that front, I don't think I have any problem. Recently, I've been fascinated by ceramics.
Okay, good. Follow it.
And just clay. Just the fact that we can take mud and make beautiful things out of it, and functional things.
Good.
With music, I don't know what to do anymore when I'm seeing these AI tools, these AI music generators, and they're just pretty incredible.
That's going to be harsh, yeah. So now you know what painters went through. What painters went through when the camera was invented.
It's crazy. The amount of time spent learning how to use, production tools to produce music, and then the amount of time it takes to produce a song. And then I've been testing these AI music generators out, and they can do a whole song in 2 seconds. And they're not perfect. They need some work, but it's...
You sound like a photographer at the turn of the last century, where they're saying these photographs can do a whole portrait painting in 2 seconds. Click.
Yeah.
So just the artists will have to be artists. That's the whole point of art, though. You wouldn't want something stagnant. Yeah. Right? So, they used to paint in egg tempera, and they didn't have the color blue. And so, art moves with technology. So just look for art, and you won't go too far wrong.
Yeah.
I doubt machines will be able to do real art. But people would have to be able to tell the difference. And some people can.
They take away the edge that experts have. And so they're, in terms of career as an artist, you're all of a sudden, you spent 10 years learning.
Nobody said anything about careers. Nobody said about, look at Van Gogh. The guy couldn't sell a painting to save his life. He was broke.
Right.
and suicidal, and but he was a true artist, right? He followed his art. Look at Nicholas de Stael. So
Yeah,
these
for
aren't
true
careers for money. Neither is science, for that matter.
art.
But so invest in yourself.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's all the questions I had.
All right, sir. Adios. Take good care.
Thank you. You too.